She stood at attention in the briefing room, while the male commandos exchanged knowing glances and barely concealed smirks. Captain Elena Rodriguez had just been assigned to Alpha Team for what intelligence called the most dangerous hostage rescue operation in recent military history. "Sir," Sergeant Miller said to the commanding officer, "with all due respect, this mission requires experience we can't risk compromising." The other team members nodded in agreement, their expressions making it clear they considered her presence a liability rather than an asset. Elena said nothing, maintaining perfect military bearing while internally preparing for what she knew would be the defining moment of her career. But when the operation went catastrophically wrong and 12 hostages were trapped in a building surrounded by heavily armed terrorists, what Elena did next would not only save every single life, but rewrite the military's understanding of what female soldiers could accomplish under impossible circumstances. Welcome to those who left a trace. Before we dive into this extraordinary story of courage, determination, and tactical brilliance, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe that heroism knows no gender, hit that subscribe button to support stories that honor the brave women who serve our nation with distinction. The Joint Special Operations Command briefing room at Fort Bragg was thick with tension on that humid North Carolina morning in September. The situation developing in Somalia had escalated beyond diplomatic solutions, and American intelligence had confirmed that 12 aid workers, including 3 American citizens, were being held hostage by a terrorist cell in a fortified compound outside Mogadishu. Captain Elena Rodriguez sat in the back row of the briefing room, her presence drawing sideways glances from the elite Special Forces operators who comprised Alpha Team. At 29, she possessed qualifications that should have earned automatic respect. Ranger School graduate, airborne qualified, expert marksman, and holder of 2 Bronze Stars for valor during previous deployments in Afghanistan. But Elena was also the first woman ever assigned to Alpha Team for a direct action mission, and the skepticism among her new teammates was palpable. These men had worked together for years, developing the kind of trust and coordination that kept them alive in the most dangerous situations imaginable. Master Sergeant Jake Wilson, Alpha Team Senior Non-Commissioned Officer, had made his feelings about Elena's assignment clear during informal conversations with other team members. "I've got nothing against women in the military," he had said repeatedly, "but hostage rescue requires split-second decisions and absolute trust. We don't have time to wonder if she can handle the pressure." Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Hayes entered the briefing room at precisely 0800 hours, his expression grim as he approached the podium. Hayes had commanded special operations for 8 years, and Elena could see from his body language that the intelligence they were about to receive was more serious than previous briefings had indicated. "Gentlemen," Hayes began, his eyes sweeping across the assembled team before settling briefly on Elena, "and Captain Rodriguez, the situation in Mogadishu has deteriorated significantly overnight." Hayes activated a large display screen that showed satellite imagery of a 3-story concrete building surrounded by sparse vegetation and open terrain. The compound appeared to be isolated, with clear sight lines in all directions that would make any approach extremely challenging. "Intelligence indicates that our hostages are being held on the 2nd floor of this building," Hayes continued, "while the terrorist cell has positioned heavily armed guards throughout the compound and established offensive positions that cover all probable approach routes." Elena studied the imagery carefully, noting details that would be crucial for planning entry routes and evacuation procedures. The building's construction appeared solid enough to provide good cover for defenders, while the open ground surrounding would expose any rescue force to significant risk during approach and extraction. "The terrorist leader has issued an ultimatum," Hayes said, his voice carrying the weight of urgency. "Unless the Somali government releases 30 imprisoned fighters, the hostages will be executed starting at sunset tomorrow. That gives us approximately 18 hours to plan and execute a rescue operation." Sergeant First Class Tommy Chin, Alpha Team's demolitions expert, raised his hand. "Sir, what's our intelligence on enemy strength and weapons?" Hayes consulted his briefing notes. Estimated 12 to 15 fighters armed with AK-47s, RPGs, and at least 1 heavy machine gun positioned to cover the main approaches. Additionally, they reportedly rigged the building with explosives that could be detonated if they detect a rescue attempt. The implications were sobering. Alpha Team would need to neutralize a well-armed and prepared enemy force while ensuring the safety of 12 civilian hostages in a building that might be booby-trapped. Team assignments, Hayes continued. Wilson will lead the primary assault element. Chin handles breaching and demolitions. Rodriguez provides overwatch and precision fire support. Elena felt the eyes of every team member turn toward her as Hayes outlined her role in the operation. Overwatch typically meant positioning herself at a distance from the main action, providing sniper support while the assault team entered the building. Sergeant Miller, a veteran of dozens of similar operations, spoke up. Sir, Overwatch of this mission will require someone who can adapt quickly if the situation changes. The position might need to shift locations or transition to close quarters combat without warning. Elena understood the subtext. Miller was questioning whether she could handle the dynamic requirements of a fluid tactical situation. Sergeant Miller, Elena said calmly, I'm prepared to fulfill whatever role best serves the mission's success. Hayes looked at Elena directly. Captain Rodriguez, your marksmanship scores and tactical assessments indicate you're qualified for this assignment. However, I need to know that you understand the stakes. If this operation fails, 12 innocent people die. Elena met his gaze without hesitation. Sir, I understand completely. These people are counting on us to bring them home safely. Hayes nodded, then addressed the entire team. We have 6 hours to finalize our operational plan and conduct equipment checks. Questions? The team dispersed to begin their preparations, but Elena noticed that the conversations among the male team members excluded her, despite her official assignment to the mission. She understood their reluctance to accept her, but she also knew that earning their trust would require demonstrating competence under pressure rather than arguing about it in briefing rooms. Elena spent the preparation time reviewing building schematics, studying satellite imagery, and calculating firing solutions for various scenarios she might encounter during the mission. Her training had taught her that thorough preparation was a foundation of tactical success, and she intended to be ready for any situation the operation might present. As the team conducted final equipment checks, Elena noticed Sergeant Wilson observing her preparation routine. She methodically tested her communications equipment, zeroed her rifle scope, and organized her ammunition according to specific engagement scenarios. Rodriguez, Wilson said, approaching her work area, you seem pretty calm for someone about to go into their first hostage rescue. Elena looked up from her rifle maintenance. Sergeant Wilson, this isn't my first direct action mission. I understand the requirements. Wilson studied her for a moment, clearly trying to assess her mindset and readiness. Ma'am, I'm not questioning your courage or your training, but this team has worked together for a long time, and we've learned to depend on each other completely. We need to know that you'll be there when things get bad. Elena appreciated his directness. Sergeant, you'll know who I am when the shooting starts. Until then, I understand your skepticism. The conversation was interrupted by Lieutenant Colonel Hayes announcing final mission briefing in 30 minutes. Elena gathered her equipment and joined the team for what would be their last detailed review of the operational plan before deployment. The mission briefing revealed complexities that made Elena realize why Alpha Team's reputation for handling impossible situations was legendary throughout the special operations community. The hostage location was not only heavily defended, but positioned in a way that made traditional assault tactics extremely risky for the captives. The building layout presents several challenges, Hayes explained, updating the satellite imagery with detailed floor plans obtained through classified intelligence sources. The hostages are being held in 2 rooms on the 2nd floor, separated by a hallway that's covered by guard positions at both ends. Elena studied the layout carefully, noting that any assault team would need to clear multiple defensive positions while moving through a confined space where gunfire could easily endanger the hostages they were trying to rescue. Additionally, Hayes continued, thermal imaging indicates that the terrorists have positioned explosives at several locations throughout the building. Our demolitions assessment suggests they could bring down entire sections if they detect a rescue attempt. Sergeant Chin leaned forward in his chair. Sir, are we looking at a simultaneous breach from multiple entry points or sequential assault? Hayes activated a tactical overlay on the building diagram. The plan calls for Wilson's assault element to breach the main entrance while Rodriguez provides overwatch from the water tower approximately 400 meters northwest of the target building. Elena examined the firing position Hayes had identified for her role. The water tower would provide an elevated position with clear sight lines to the building, but it would also isolate her from the rest of the team during the most critical phase of the operation. "Ma'am," Miller said, addressing Elena directly. "From that position, you'll be responsible for neutralizing any enemy fighters who might threaten the assault team or attempt to harm the hostages. Are you prepared for shots that might need to be taken with hostages in close proximity?" The question addressed one of the most challenging aspects of hostage rescue operations. Elena would need to engage enemy targets with precision that left no margin for error, knowing that any mistake could result in civilian casualties. "Sergeant Miller, I'm qualified for precision shooting in close-quarter scenarios. I understand the requirements." Hayes concluded the briefing with timeline details. "We deploy in 2 hours. Transportation will be via helicopter to a landing zone 3 kilometers from the target. Elena, you'll need to reach your overwatch position and establish communications before the assault team begins their approach." As the team prepared for deployment, Elena conducted final checks on her specialized equipment. Her rifle was configured for precision shooting at distances up to 500 meters, equipped with advanced optics that would allow her to clearly identify targets even in low-light conditions. The flight to Somalia took 4 hours, during which Elena reviewed her operational responsibilities and mentally rehearsed the various scenarios she might encounter. The other team members prepared their equipment and reviewed their own assignments, but she noticed that their conversations still excluded her. Elena understood their hesitancy. In special operations, trust was earned through shared experience under extreme pressure, and she had not yet had the opportunity to prove herself to these particular operators. The helicopter approach to the target area was conducted under cover darkness, with the aircraft following terrain features to avoid detection by any enemy radar systems. Elena felt a familiar combination of anticipation and focused calm that preceded challenging missions. 2 minutes to landing zone. The pilot announced through the aircraft's communication system. Elena secured her equipment and prepared for the fast rope insertion that would place the team on the ground approximately 3 kilometers from their objective. The mission timeline allowed her 20 minutes to reach her overwatch position before the assault team would begin their final approach. As the helicopter settled into a hover above the designated landing zone, Elena was first out of the aircraft, fast roping to ground with the efficiency that had characterized all her training. She immediately established a security perimeter, while the rest of the team completed their insertion. Alpha team on the ground. Wilson reported through their secure communications channel. "Rodriguez, you have 20 minutes to reach overwatch position." Elena acknowledged the transmission and began moving toward the water tower that would serve as her firing position. The terrain was mostly open with scattered vegetation, requiring careful movement to avoid detection by any enemy sentries who might be monitoring the area. The approach to the water tower took her 18 minutes, moving cautiously through terrain that offered little concealment. As she climbed to her designated position, Elena could see the target building clearly through her rifle scope, noting the defensive positions that intelligence had identified. "Overwatch in position," Elena transmitted. "I have clear sight lines to the target building." Wilson's voice came back immediately. "Roger, Overwatch. We're beginning our approach now." Elena settled into her firing position, adjusting her scope and calculating range and wind factors that would affect her shooting accuracy. Through her optics, she could observe enemy sentries moving around the building's perimeter, their weapons clearly visible. As the assault team began their final approach, Elena realized that the intelligence briefing had underestimated the enemy's defensive preparations. She could see more fighters than expected, and their positions indicated a level of tactical awareness that would make the rescue operation significantly more challenging. "Alpha Leader, this is Overwatch," Elena transmitted. "I'm counting at least 18 enemy fighters, more than intelligence estimated." Wilson's response indicated concern. "Roger, Overwatch. Can you identify specific threats to our approach route?" Elena adjusted her scope, studying the enemy positions more carefully. "Alpha Leader, they positioned a heavy machine gun to cover your primary approach route. I can engage that position, but it will reveal my location. The tactical decision was complex. Elena could neutralize a machine gun position, but doing so would expose her to counterfire and potentially compromise her ability to provide overwatch for the rest of the operation. Overwatch, stand by, Wilson transmitted. We're assessing alternate approach routes. Elena continued her observation, noting that the enemy had also positioned fighters in locations that intelligence had not identified. The operation was becoming more complex by the minute, and she began to realize that the original plan might not be adequate for the situation they were actually facing. That's when everything went wrong. Elena watched through her scope as the assault team's approach was detected by an enemy sentry, who immediately triggered an alarm. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions around the building, and the carefully planned operation suddenly became a desperate fight for survival. Contact! Contact! Wilson's voice came through the communications channel, accompanied by the sound of automatic weapons fire. We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Elena immediately began engaging enemy targets, her rifle firing with precision that had earned her expert marksman qualification. Her first shot neutralized a heavy machine gun position that threatened the assault team, but the gunfire revealed her location to other enemy fighters. Overwatch, we need immediate fire support. Chen's voice was strained, indicating that the assault team was in serious trouble. Elena continued engaging targets, but she realized that the enemy had prepared more extensively than anyone had anticipated. The assault team was pinned down in the open ground surrounding the building, unable to advance or retreat safely. Through her scope, Elena saw something that made her blood run cold. Several enemy fighters were moving toward the building's second floor, where the hostages were being held. If the terrorists reached the hostages, they would almost certainly execute them to prevent their rescue. The tactical situation had become impossible. The assault team was pinned down, enemy reinforcements were arriving, and the hostages were in immediate danger. Everything that could go wrong had gone wrong. That's when Elena made a decision that would define her military career and prove to everyone what she was truly capable of accomplishing. Elena realized that the original operational plan had become completely untenable. The assault team was pinned down under heavy fire, unable to advance toward the building or retreat to safety. Worse, she could see through her scope that armed terrorists were moving toward the second floor where the hostages were being held. Alpha Leader, this is Overwatch, Elena transmitted, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding below. The hostiles are moving toward the hostage location. We have minutes before they reach the second floor. Wilson's response came between bursts of gunfire. Overwatch, we can't advance. Too much fire from defensive positions. Request immediate fire support. Elena calculated rapidly. She could continue providing Overwatch support, but that wouldn't solve the fundamental problem. The assault team couldn't reach the building, and the hostages were about to be executed by terrorists who realized their position was under attack. There was only one solution, and it violated every principle of tactical operations she had been taught. Alpha Leader, I'm leaving Overwatch position, Elena transmitted. Wilson's response was immediate and forceful. Negative. Overwatch, maintain your position. We need your fire support. Elena was already moving, gathering her equipment for rapid displacement. Alpha Leader, the terrorists will reach the hostages before you can advance. I'm going to create a diversion and establish an alternate entry route. She didn't wait for Wilson's response. Elena knew that what she was planning violated tactical doctrine and could easily result in her death, but it was the only way to save 12 innocent lives. Elena descended from the water tower and began moving toward the target building, using available cover to mask her approach. Her plan was simple and desperate. Create enough confusion to draw enemy attention away from the assault team, while finding a way to reach the hostages before the terrorists could execute them. The distance to the building was approximately 300 meters across the terrain that offered minimal concealment. Elena moved in short rushes between available cover, knowing that she was essentially conducting a one-person assault against overwhelming odds. As she advanced, Elena used her rifle to engage enemy positions that threatened either her approach or the pinned-down assault team. Her shooting was precise and effective, but each shot revealed her position to more enemy fighters. "Rodriguez, what the hell are you doing?" Wilson's voice came through her earpiece, barely audible over the sound of gunfire. Elena reached a position approximately 50 meters from the building's rear wall. From here, she could see that the terrorists had not established defensive positions covering the back of the structure, apparently assuming that any assault would come from the front. "Alpha Leader, I'm at the building's rear wall. No enemy positions covering this approach." Elena located a window that appeared to provide access to the building's first floor. It was partially boarded up, but she could see gaps that would allow entry if she could reach the window without detection. The final approach to the building required crossing 20 meters of open ground with no cover. Elena took a deep breath, checked her weapon, and sprinted toward the window. She covered the distance in seconds, throwing herself against the building's wall just as enemy fire began tracking her movement. Bullets struck the concrete inches from her position, but she had reached the building safely. Elena quickly assessed the window access. The boards were old and loose, allowing her to create an opening large enough to enter the building. She slipped through the window into what appeared to be a storage room on the first floor. The interior of the building was dimly lit and filled with the sound of gunfire from outside and shouting from floors above. Elena could hear voices speaking in a language she didn't recognize, but the tone suggested urgency and alarm. She moved carefully through the first floor, clearing rooms and identifying a stairway that would take her to the second floor where intelligence indicated the hostages were being held. As Elena reached the stairway, she could hear footsteps and voices from above. The terrorists were definitely on the second floor, and from what she could determine, they were preparing to move the hostages. Elena began climbing the stairs, her rifle ready, and her senses hyper-alert for any indication of enemy presence. Each step could expose her enemy fire, but the hostages' lives depended on her reaching them before the terrorists could execute them. At the top of the stairs, Elena found herself in a hallway with several doors. She could hear voices coming from two rooms, consistent with intelligence reports that the hostages were being held in separate groups. Elena positioned herself where she could observe both rooms while remaining concealed. Through gaps under the doors, she could see light and shadows that indicated multiple people in each room. That's when she heard the voice that made her realize how little time remained. A man was speaking loudly in accented English. "American soldiers are attacking. We kill the hostages now." Elena had seconds to act. She moved to the first door, noting that it was secured with a simple latch rather than a sophisticated lock. Through the gap beneath the door, she could see at least 3 pairs of feet, likely 2 terrorists and several hostages. Elena prepared a stun grenade, knowing that the explosion would disorient everyone in the room, but give her crucial seconds to neutralize the armed terrorists before they could harm the hostages. She positioned herself beside the door, pulled the pin on the stun grenade, and kicked the door open while tossing the device into the room. The explosion was deafening in a confined space. Elena immediately entered the room, her rifle ready to engage any armed targets. The scene inside was exactly what she had expected. 5 hostages on the floor, their hands bound, and 2 terrorists stunned by the grenade but reaching for their weapons. Elena's training took over completely. She engaged both terrorists with precise rifle fire, neutralizing them before they could recover from the stun grenade's effects. "American soldiers," she called out to the hostages. "Stay down. I'm here to get you out." Elena quickly moved to the second room, knowing that the terrorists inside had heard the gunfire and would be preparing to kill their hostages rather than allow them to be rescued. She repeated the same technique. Stun grenade followed by immediate entry and engagement of armed targets. The second room contained 7 more hostages and 3 terrorists, all of whom were neutralized before they could harm the civilians. All hostages secured. Elena transmitted to the assault team. "Second floor clear. I need immediate backup for evacuation." Wilson's response came immediately. "Rodriguez, we're moving to your position now. How many hostages?" Elena was already beginning to organize the hostages for evacuation, checking each person for injuries and preparing them for movement to safety. 12 hostages, all alive, several with minor injuries but all ambulatory. I'm preparing them for evacuation via the rear window access route. As Elena coordinated the hostage evacuation, she heard the assault team entering the building below. The external gunfire had ceased, indicating that the enemy defensive positions had been neutralized or abandoned. Wilson appeared at the top of the stairs, his expression mixing relief with amazement. "Rodriguez, what you just did, that was either the bravest or the craziest thing I've ever seen." Elena was helping an injured hostage toward the stairs. "Sergeant Wilson, we need to get these people to medical attention immediately." The evacuation proceeded smoothly, with each hostage being carefully moved from the building to the landing zone, where helicopters were waiting to transport them to safety. As the last hostage was loaded onto the evacuation aircraft, Wilson approached Elena one final time. "Captain Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. We all do. What you accomplished today, none of us could have done it." Elena removed her helmet, finally allowed herself to acknowledge the magnitude of what had just occurred. "Sergeant Wilson, we're a team. Teams support each other." The flight back to base gave Elena time to reflect on the mission and its implications for her military career. She had violated tactical doctrine by abandoning her assigned position, but she had also saved 12 lives that would have been lost if she had followed orders. More importantly, she had proven to herself and the Alpha team that gender was irrelevant when it came to courage, tactical competence, and the willingness to risk everything for fellow human beings. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes met the team upon their return to base, his expression indicating that he had monitored the mission communications and understood exactly what had occurred. "Captain Rodriguez," Hayes said, "I'll be recommending you for the Silver Star for your actions today. But more than that, you've earned something that can't be awarded: the absolute respect of every operator in this command." Elena nodded, understanding that her military career had fundamentally changed during those crucial minutes in Somalia. She had proven that capability and courage had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with training, dedication, and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to accomplish the mission. The woman they had doubted had become the soldier they would trust with their lives. Have you ever had to prove yourself in a situation where everyone doubted your abilities? Elena Rodriguez represents a kind of courage that doesn't ask for recognition, but earns it through action when lives are on the line. Subscribe to those who left a trace if you believe that heroism comes in all forms, and that the most important qualifications are determination and the willingness to risk everything for others. We'll see you in the next story, where we'll continue to honor those who prove that strength and courage know no boundaries, and that the greatest heroes are often those who step forward when everyone else steps back.